Hello, everybody. How are you doing? Hello, chat. Hello, Jeremy Lord.
Hello, hey everybody, how's it going?
It's good to have you back. Hey, reader in the
Good to be
chat.
back.
Johanna Festus, what's up? Pops and Betties, that's right. Hello, all you cool cats and
Oh,
kittens.
Festus. While I'm at it, actually, I wanted to give a bit of a shout out to Festus. I was talking about a typeface last time we were on, and Festus sent me a link to that. So much gratitude to Festus.
Good man. Thank you very much. Hey, Sam, how you doing there? Great to have you in chat. So, Jeremy Lloyd, you were on last week, twice last week, I think it was. So we've been hanging out quite a bit, which is
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, no different to normal life, I guess.
That's right. That's right. And for this particular time, we wanted to see your take on the On a Heroes campaign that's been
Yeah.
happening around the world. And we had Ben Marriott on recently, who did an amazing illustration, then animated it here with us.
Mm.
Actually, I'm going to switch over to your screen because you're showing actual cool stuff. This was Ben Marriott's kind of answer to the brief as part of the campaign. So this is the illustration that he did the other day and animated it on stream. And he's going to be publishing the final one up there soon as well. So definitely follow him to check it out. It was
Mm.
super cool, heaps of fun. He's got such an interesting style, doesn't he, Jeremy?
Yeah, he does. Yeah, it's such like it's. There's always just sort of like, this. Where did you get this from? This is so crazy. It's really like, and then how he animates it as well. It's really, yeah, love it. Really cool.
It's super cool. But let's flick over to the Honor Heroes campaign. So for those that might not be familiar with it, we can kind of give a bit of a rundown. So of course, at the moment, this time in our lives, more than ever, we're sort of realizing so these people that are kind of making everything chug along. So nurses and doctors are all kind of the very first thing, people that sort of come to mind, who are just
Hmm.
doing such amazing stuff. They're kind of out there every day. And making sure everything can run and we can stay home and be safe. This is a campaign around honoring those people, and it's open to anybody. Just using the hashtag Honor Heroes. And yeah, there's been some really great illustrations. I think if you scroll down, that first one was by Obey Giant, Shepard Fairey.
Shepard Fairey, yeah. Mm.
Glad I remembered that in front of you. I would have been embarrassed if I couldn't remember Shepard's name. And there's some, other, as you can see, lots of different styles. And these are probably people that are very experienced, but it doesn't matter what level your experience is. You can do a quick sketch, you can do a quick draw. Don't even have to have any software to do it. Just get involved, take a photo of it, and share it with the
Mm.
hashtag. We'd love to see it, and tag us as well. We love to see what everyone's producing. But yeah, you can get involved. And we thought that this would be a great brief for some of our streamers while this is going on. And so, Jeremy, this is the brief that we gave you. So, what do you think?
Yeah, I really love this brief. I think it's a chance to do something a little bit different for me as well.
Mm,
But I think it's also really important to do these kind of things, and people doing the clapping. There's a lot of kind of mentions of this around sort of the news and social media streams and all that.
mm,
So I think it's great for Adobe to put this brief out and get creatives to put their take on it. I think it's really cool as well to see some people actually doing real people, like people that they know. It's like their local grocery
mm,
store stocker, or they're a nurse that might be related to them, or that they is taking care of them or something. So
mm,
um, yeah, I think that's really nice to see that kind of like personal touch,
mm.
which I think I might not be doing today. I'm going to do a slightly different take on this, so mine's probably not going to be an actual person. Um, but we'll see. We'll see where that goes. I've got a loose idea of what I'm going to be doing today. But beyond that, it's we'll see what happens in the next 2 hours.
Cool. We'll watch together. Festus has brought this up before. I was wondering if you're still considering the manga Peppa Pig idea for another stream.
I am potentially, yeah. I'm feeling something a little bit mangery today.
Mm,
Um, so I think the what I did last week on the stream is a slightly different style to what we were talking about, and we can kind of touch upon this as we're getting into it. But
mm,
today I think I'm going to turn the dial back to more sort of like manga vibes, and see where that ends up. And I feel like it fits the kind of the superhero kind of action hero thing to do kind of like a frame out of a manga book page. Yeah, I think could be interesting to do today. Yeah, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, definitely still considering the Peppa Pig manga. Do something a little bit more grown up with Peppa Pig. See how it goes.
Not too grown up. This isn't Twitch. All right.
No.
So should we? Why don't we just have a quick look at some of your work for those that may not be familiar with it, because we were talking about your style and how it fits in with your style. Maybe we'll just pick something if you've got your portfolio around. Yeah, cool.
Yeah. So this is my website, and so we were talking about last week's stream. So this is what we did on the stream last week.
Yeah.
And it was very sort of a bit of custom type, a bit of cyberpunk, all the kind of different knobs that I like to kind of play around with. And there's a range of different things here, varying in between sort of Japanese, cyberpunk, a little bit retro, a bit neon. Every now and then I'll throw in some pixel art as well for good measure. Quite enjoy doing that. Completely different technique to what I would normally work with. And then, yeah, every now and then I also get a little bit more kind of like manga vibes, and we'll do something like this, which is probably what is going to be happening today. So, yeah, that's me in a kind of very neon nutshell.
Neon nutshell. I like it. So yeah, so just to like, if you're watching live here and you jump over to Behance, I know we're streaming to a couple of other channels as well. So jump in there and you can ask us questions as we go, or ask Jeremy as he goes. I'm just going to sit here and ask silly questions otherwise. Yeah, just jump into Behance, ask us questions. So we'll probably take a break for kind of more intense questions if there's some meaning of life stuff about midway, and give Jeremy's wrist a momentary break before he continues going in, because it's going to be quite intense today. Yeah, ask your questions. We got a little timer happening there. Let's jump in. Oh, you've already started.
Yeah, let's jump in.
You already started. I'm way behind.
Yeah, I've just, this is my kind of like warm up. It's just like, it's when you're doing these kind of sketches, I think it can be a good idea to, just like you would if you were going into the gym or doing some exercise, you don't just do it straight up from nothing. I think it's a good idea to do a little bit of warm up. Sometimes I'll do a bunch of sketches like this. Other times I'll just do a bunch of ellipses just to get the kind of the blood flowing and the muscles kind of get, shake the cobwebs off a little bit, and see how it ends up. It's also a chance to kind of explore a little bit of a few different ideas. So I've got some different ideas for poses here that I might kind of explore. I've got something kind of like Rosie the Riveter, if you guys know that illustration from World War II, the one that's got like "We Can Do It" written at the top here. So just exploring a range of different kind of bottom up kind of angles to get that real superhero vibe. And I'm again, it's going to be kind of manga, so I'm feeling something a little bit more active, less of a standard kind of full-on portrait kind of thing. I think I'd like to get into something a little bit more action-oriented. And I think when you're doing that kind of stuff, like you can see I'm doing like basic stick figures here, trying to get that line of action right. So line of action is a bit of a drawing thing for those of you guys who know. It's basically the line that the action is taking overall. So if you've got somebody like if it's like a Tom and Jerry thing and he's like pouncing on it, that would be your line of action. So if like Tom is pouncing on Jerry down here, like that's the line that you would start to draw with, and then everything kind of bolts onto that. I don't know how to draw Tom and Jerry, so I'm not going to try while we're live, but yeah, having that kind of, it just makes it a lot more kind of fluid and a lot more dynamic. So start with that, and then you just do your basic kind of shapes. But yeah, having a bit of a warm-up sketch, I think, is always a good idea to do that. That's my horrible rendition of poor Tom.
Oh, that's a cool cat, though. Did you bring that up because of the news of the animator of Tom and Jerry?
No, I didn't. I haven't heard anything actually about
He's
that.
no longer with us, unfortunately. I thought that might be why you brought it up.
No, I didn't. And
Oh,
sad news.
that's really sad.
So,
I'm so sorry about that. Oh dear.
So yeah, all right. So let's get a little bit more kind of stuck in. I want to do a nurse. I know that this sort of like there's a lot of different people at different levels being, I guess, heroes these days. I've got a little bit of a medical past, and so even sort of pre-COVID, I've kind of dealt with nurses quite a bit and seen the stuff to do versus how some patients treat them and how even kind of what their work conditions can be like. And the work that they do compared to the risk they take and the gratitude they get is just incredible. So yeah, I'm going to do a nurse today, and she's going to be a superpower nurse. I think she's going to have like healing mage hands, kind of stuff like that.
Nice.
So yeah, so let's get kind of stuck in. I'm just going to make a new layer here. I'm using just a standard kind of pencil-y looking brush just to start with. Yeah, so let's get into it.
I love when you the last time when we were streaming, I was trying to think, how am I hearing your scratch, like your pencil, but I'm picking up the actual sound of you scratching onto the Wacom.
That's right. Yeah,
It's giving me like a real. It's giving me like a little pencil sound. It's really cool. It's like a great little effect.
Yeah, we try. Sometimes I'd like the Wacom's got a bit of texture on it, and the nib that I'm using on the thing. For those of you guys who use Wacoms, it's like a felt nib, so it's got a little bit of texture. It just gives it a bit of grip, and it stops it having that feeling of like sliding all over the place, which is not great. But every now and then as well, I'll put an actual piece of paper down onto the Wacom to really get that kind of paper vibe.
Oh, like over the top of the Wacom?
Yeah,
Really?
because the signal still goes through the piece of paper.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And so it just means that you've got a little bit more kind of room to move around with, for sure. All right, let's go. Let's get stuck in.
Cool. Amanda, good to see you, Amanda, was asking, she noticed a lot of illustrators use blue color in the sketch process. Is there any particular reason for that?
Yes, there is actually. That's a good question. The blue in the sketch is an old animator trick where people used to use blue to do the basic kind of animations of things. And then you would have a cleanup artist come around with black and go over the top of that. And so you'd get like, you'd get a much cleaner line. So even kind of visually looking at it like that, you can see the black stands out a lot more than the blue does. But it's also, I think, something of, there's this idea that when you're shooting the animation, so literally like classic animation is literally just photographs of the piece of paper. So you get like a piece of paper down here and there's a camera that shoots it, which is why you probably see an animation paper has these holes at the bottom that kind of look like this. And that's because there's pegs on this board, and then you put your pieces of your drawings on there, so they're always aligned. And this thing's called a line tester, and it shoots in black and white. And this particular color blue doesn't show up on the grayscale. It doesn't show up, so only your black lines show up on top of it. So you could literally just draw on top of your blue line drawing, and nothing would show. So it's a really good way to just do a basic sketch and not have to worry too much about doing a cleanup. Not that it particularly matters in Photoshop too much, because you can always just do layers, and that's what I'll be doing today. But yeah, the blue is just one of those things that's stuck because like visually it's a differentiation, but it's just kind of stuck from this idea of the days of animation. So yeah, so that's where that comes from. Bit of a long-winded answer, but yeah.
Cool.
So yeah, so I'm doing a bit of like foreshortening here, where her arm is like coming straight at us, and I think I want to give her let's give her a bar of soap. There's like another hero in here. The old soap. How good's soap these days?
It's funny you should say that. There was back, at the very kind of, panic buying stage of everything, and hand soap was quite hard to get. I remember sort of being in the supermarket and there was all this like disinfectant soap, but actual bars of soap, but that was all there. It was completely untouched. And I was finding it really funny, like that people were not bothering to hoard the actual bars of soap because they wanted to just use the hand soap. And I thought it was great. Like, I love that idea that like in the middle of a crisis, it's like, oh no, but not that. That's not my favorite.
Yeah.
Like the gluten-free, all the gluten-free food was still there as well. It was always a funny contrast.
That's it. Yeah, I've never thought about that. Yeah, it would still be there, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
That's where all the gluten-free people would be like, oh man, this is great.
Yeah, they're absolutely fine. So when you're planning something like this, like, do you ever use a reference photo? Like, are you...
Yeah, so every now and then I'll use myself as a reference. So I'll just take a photo of myself. If I'm struggling with a hand that a hand angle that I've never drawn before, I'll definitely grab some reference of that to see how that actually looks. And reference is important to look at because it makes your thing look more real, right? So it's super important to make sure that you kind of keep doing that. It can be really easy. The more you draw, the more you might decide like, oh, I know how to draw this. I'm not going to look at reference. And then that's when you can start to fall into this thing of, yeah, that's not looking good and I'm not sure why. And it's because you didn't do your referencing properly.
Right.
So yeah, I would potentially look at reference for things like this hand, for instance, like, and this I think is one of those things with sketching. Like, I think people just assume that you're able to draw anything. And like, sometimes the first kind of sketch, and thankfully that's the case on this one, I'm quite happy with how this hand has turned out holding this bar of soap. But there will be times when I'm like, I'll try and do it again and again. And it's like, damn it, it's not working. What am I doing? And that's when I will actually make this pose with my hand and take a photo of it and bring it in and stick it like next to my image and use that as a reference to draw that thing properly. And every time I do that, I'm like, man, I should have done that like 2 hours ago. What am I doing?
Right.
So yeah, it's super fun to draw reference free especially when you know what you're doing. But there's definitely those times where you think you know what you're doing, but you kind of don't actually. So we'll give her a old staff here, old medical staff. I always forget. I think it's like a Pocles or something. I can't remember the name of the god who has the medicine staff. Curiously, it's just one of those little, what's it called? Little bits of trivia, getting sidetracked. But the usual thing that you see, especially in the States, where it's like this one with the wings and the two snakes.
Yeah.
Called the caduceus. That's Hermes stuff that has absolutely nothing to do with medical practice.
Really?
That's business and enterprise. Yeah. So like, I don't know why that's been kind of taken up, but yeah, this one is the proper one. So we'll work with that for now. And we'll try and give her a little bit of an aura here. So I'm kind of liking how this is going. You can see that there's a lot wrong with this at this stage, but again, it's not absolutely terrible. Like there's a lot of stuff that I can fix, but I can fix that later on when I'm actually working on the proper outline. And that's where the blue versus the black comes in super handy, because I can really kind of fix that up a little bit later on. So probably at this stage, what I will do is I will make a new layer. And I'll come back and name these in a sec because that's going to be pretty important. But then based on this, I can start to do a little bit more kind of detail and finality and seeing how that's all going to kind of come together. So let's just come in here and draw a little bit more clearly what's happening. She'll probably have a face mask, but one of the things that I like to do as well when I'm drawing, and this, like, my teachers mentioned this to me when I was in college learning how to draw, hours and hours of just sitting there drawing. There's this idea of drawing from the inside out, which is really interesting, which is like, maybe first time I heard, like, what does that mean? But what it means is, I guess, draw the structure first. So you can see here, I've drawn the rib cage, I've drawn this line of action, I've done this kind of stick figure kind of thing, and that's what's known as drawing from the inside out. So the example that I always kind of like to think about is, if you're drawing like a bag of potatoes, if you're trying to do like, okay, there's a bump here, and then it goes in, and then there's another bump there, and there's another one here, and then there's the angle of the bag, and there's another thing here, it's going to be really hard for you to get those proportions right. Whereas if you draw it from the inside, as in you draw the actual potatoes inside of the bag, then all those things are going to create themselves, and all you need to do is draw the cloth around that, and that's just going to make so much more sense. So drawing from the inside out basically just means, like, draw, literally the inside of the thing first, and then you can look at doing the stuff, like basically draw the muscles and the skeleton, and then you can put the skin on there. But if you're going to try, especially with the human body, if you're going to try and draw things a little bit more kind of simply, a little bit more straight up just from the outline, there's a chance that A, you'll struggle, and B, you may very well get it wrong. So yeah, drawing from the inside out is just like a huge tip that I was given when I was in college, and it took me a little bit of time to really understand what the hell that meant. But eventually it just meant that it's like, oh man, that makes sense, and it clicked, and just everything is like, oh yeah, this is so much easier.
It's a really good tip.
If that makes sense, at least.
Makes sense to me. What do you think, chat?
Okay, that's not looking too bad here. I've got a rough structure. I've moved things around a little bit. This is also where I can maybe just drop the opacity on my outline so I can see my line work a little bit better. And I won't hesitate at this stage as well to do stuff like this. Again, because it's digital, I can have the luxury of like, oh yeah, that arm is going to be really short. If that's coming out of there, it's going to be a bit too short. So let's move that over here, and then I can readjust that, and like her shoulder is coming out here, and that's a little bit better. So her elbow is kind of turning away from us a little bit. Little bit of a tip for foreshortening as well. Basically, like, limbs are cylinders. So if you're drawing a cylinder coming towards you, what you'd see is something like this instead of that.
Right.
So yeah, just it's one of those things with foreshortening that you can see people doing, is this idea that something's coming towards you, so that's where the elbow is, and then the shoulder goes in, and then the hand comes way big out at you. Yeah.
Cool.
So trying to get that right is always can be a little bit tricky, but on this one, I think it's all right. She's also only got 4 fingers on her hand here, so let's go in and fix that, shall we? Don't want.
Tricia was asking, what does the hero with the superpower of social distancing look like? I like that.
I don't know. I'm getting this image. You know, there's like the people who do the thing where you can get inside the bubble and it like rolls down the hill.
Oh yeah.
And there's like a person inside here. I feel like that's like social distancing hero.
Oh, that would be amazing.
I think it's also like motion sickness hero, to be fair, but
yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe like the Invisible Woman or something like that. Maybe some of those people. Trying to think of like an X-Men who would be really good at social distancing.
I don't know.
I did give Blob a lot of heat on yesterday's stream.
Isn't there one that has like all the spikes that come out of his face?
Oh, Spike Face.
I can't remember his name. Yeah, like he just contracts and like all these like spikes come out of him everywhere. I feel like that would be
There was one in one of those like
social distancing. Also, not touch your face hero.
Actually, that's really good.
So I'm drawing a bit of a frame around her. I'm going to be lazy and not draw the feet in. So I've just popped a frame around her simply to give it that kind of like dynamic thing. What it will also allow me to do, it's on a separate layer, is a little bit of a trick that I like to do sometimes, is to leave things in frame and then have like her hand can come out of the frame at us.
Right.
And it just makes that like even more kind of dynamic vibe of like, this is so action packed. It's not fitting inside of its little frame. It's a few things here. And try not to zoom in and out a million times to avoid inducing everybody with motion sickness. That's definitely something that would happen quite a bit when I would normally be doing this stage, is like a lot of zooming in and out to check. Something that we spoke about last time as well on the stream is this idea of flipping the canvas. And so I might do that now just to make sure that my proportions are looking okay. And then I'd flip that back and forth, like just to check. It's just a way of getting a new view on stuff.
Totally.
So that's not bad. And I actually kind of prefer it at this angle. So I'm going to leave it like that.
Oh yeah, Spike. Spike is who we're thinking of. We probably could have guessed that.
Probably. That's some of the names are really like, why are you called this? And others are like, oh yes, okay, I see. You have spikes on your face. You're called Spike.
Or the double naming thing as well. Like it's always FF or JJ or whatever, like Fantastic.
Oh yeah. Yeah, or like Peter
Miles
Parker,
Morales, Peter Parker.
Yeah.
One that just smells like a skunk. Yeah, that'd be pretty good at social distancing. But you'd have to come close to find out. A giant smelly sock. Worst superpower ever. It was a really handy superpower for this period in 2020. And that was it. Have you ever done any like superhero commissions or something like that, where you've like needed to illustrate something that was like superhero style or Marvel style?
A job for the AFL a little while ago. That was basically, it was when Marvel bought the rights to the stadium in Melbourne, which was originally called Etihad Stadium. So in Australia, for those of you guys who aren't from around here, we like to rename our stadiums pretty frequently with different sponsors. And so we're like, different countries will just have a name for a stadium and it's based on a place. We like to call it different things based on different sponsors. And so I think Marvel had it at the time, and the AFL commissioned me to do something for a new format of the game. And it was all revolving around superheroes. And that was an interesting brief. It's probably not my forte. Like you guys can probably see from my website that like I love manga, and it's where I get a lot of my references, and it's what made me want to start drawing in the first place was watching a lot of manga as a kid. But yeah, it's not my greatest strength. It requires a pretty insane level of like raw drawing skills, especially when you're talking about like human proportions, which I am still trying to get a grip on. Like, I'm still trying to get to that level where I'm like, yeah, okay, I feel comfortable drawing humans in a bunch of different ways without feeling like it's just going to be all out of whack on the proportions and such. So,
right.
Yeah.
We were talking about the worst superpowers ever in chat. Festus has said, matter eater lad. He just eats solid stuff like rocks and trees and stuff. Yeah, Sandman from Spider-Man was pretty bad. That's true.
Yeah. Isn't that the guy who eats the trees and the rocks? Isn't that the dude from Neverending Story? He's not technically not a superhero, but yeah, the big rock dude, the big rock dude who rides around on his giant rock bike. I think his name is Rockman, but yeah, that's not an amazing superpower to have for sure.
There is an X-Men. I do read a lot of Marvel comics. There is a story arc where there's a person who is accepted as a X-Man. Oh, well, he's not an X-Man, but he gets to go to Xavier's school for gifted youngsters. And they tried to work out what his superpower is. And his superpower is that he could explode once, but he would die. And so, like, the precogs worked out, yeah, you will use your superpower one day. And so he was just like hanging out at the school, and otherwise he was just completely normal. But at any point he wanted to, he could explode and take out like an entire town or something. And it didn't end well. It didn't end well, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, no, that's not the kind of superpower you want, is it?
The whole comic was him walking around being like, "Oh, this is the worst superhero power ever." Like,
yeah, sucks. It would be for sure. I had this. So I'm half French, and I grew up in France. In France, we have they're not comic books per se, but they're basically it's the same idea. And I had this one. I remember where it was this world where everybody was born with a power. And it could be like a really awesome power, or it could be a really like trivial, strange power. And one of the hero, I think, had the power to like melt metal. So everybody in like all the like main protagonist people in the story had like useful powers, like healing people, or changing water into ice or steam, or like changing metal to like melt it. But one of the guys in there, his superpower is that he can emit farts of a different color every day. So he could, that's this his thing, you just like blue ones, red ones, and it's like that's not super useful, let's be fair. All right, so that's looking pretty good at this stage. I'm probably not going to go into like crazy detail, like compared to last week's stream where there was quite a bit going on. I think I'm going to keep this one a little bit more straightforward and a little bit rougher. But the gist of it, I think, will be there.
Getting Bulma vibes from the eyes.
Yeah, there's definitely that kind of like manga look, which is, it's important to actually get the color in there pretty quickly, and then get some nice big doughy reflections happening in there.
What is with the double reflection in the manga style?
It's a thing. It's basically because your eye is a ball, and then if light is coming at it from here, you get a big one over there, but you also get a reflection. It's called a bounce light that goes down on the bottom here.
All right.
So whenever you get something like that, you'll see. It's the same with like a drop of, like if you look at a drop of water on a leaf, for instance, if the light is coming from here, like you'll get a super bright light over there, but actually the the bulk of the shadows will condense on this side because like transparent surfaces reflect light around them. So most of the light will be on the other side of your drop, but then over here you'll get a nice big shiny reflection.
Cool.
And so basically because your eye is translucent, you get the same kind of thing. It also just allows you to add more shine to the eyes, and shine in eyes is life.
Nice.
Now the question is, I'm not liking that hair. Do I give her the little nurse hat? Do I give her one of these? Or is it enough to just put the face mask on? What do you guys reckon?
Someone in chat was saying maybe she could have flowing hair like busting out of the bun, the tidy nurse vibe. Like she started her shift with a tight bun, but then she's been working so long that it's kind of starting
All right,
to.
So
that's cool. Thanks, Matthew.
Keep some of the bun. Yeah, it's a good suggestion. Also, like in terms of like getting that movement, it's handy to like if she's got like much longer kind of flowing hair, it can really lend that sense of like movement to the whole thing where she's really like moving this way.
Yeah. Boom. Suddenly Sailor Moon.
Yeah, actually, yeah. With the bun and the long hair.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is definitely a little bit of Sailor Moon-y kind of vibes. That's more than a little bit of hair sticking out of it. So maybe, you know what, maybe we'll just get rid of the bun entirely and just have the hair. So yeah, all right, so this is what I'm talking about, right? So like drawing a head should be relatively simple and straightforward. And I'm just not getting it right. So this is where I should probably spend some time and have a look at different kind of like manga images.
Do you want to use my head as a reference? I'll do this.
You're not really manga-y.
No, look, but I'll just do this until you're ready. My hair's getting long.
Dude, I gave myself a haircut the other day.
Did you? That's great.
Yeah. Thanks, man. It was just getting too long. So I'm actually kind of liking the long hair. Let's get a little bit more of a flow on that going, actually. That's better. Just a little bit more of that kind of like swoosh in the hair. That can come around the back here. Do I give her Sailor Moon things, or is that a little bit
full on Sailor Moon?
Yeah.
Medusa like snakes in her hair to match the snake of Cadius? Cadius? Pronouncing that incorrectly. That's my jam. I'm just pronouncing things incorrectly. I didn't realize how bad I was at pronouncing words until we started doing this so much. Sorry, chat. Cadius.
That's all right.
That's what we're doing.
Yeah, let's give her a little, what's it called? Little stethoscope, I think is what they're called. Nice. Kind of hanging off her neck. Is it a stethoscope?
The
one that they like
hear the heart
put on your lungs and is like, take a deep breath. That's a stethoscope, right? That's what it's called. Talking about mispronouncing things.
Nurse Joy vibes. Yeah, a bit of Nurse Joy in there too. Johanna was asking, do you have a go-to manga to reference when it comes to matching the style notes?
Not really. It's mostly just like any manga It usually is more like old school mangas than the more modern ones. Mostly also because I'm more of a fan of the old ones versus the new ones. That's just a purely personal thing. So I would just kind of reference that. But stuff like I don't know what the names are in English. I always watch these in French, and so I never remember what the names are in English. It's
What's the name in French? We like hearing the names in French.
Ranma un demi. I think it's actually called Ranma and a half. And that's a really good kind of reference for that really like awesome kind of manga style where the hair, like the fringe is just gigantic on the head, and it's, like this kind of thing. That's always really kind of fun to work with. Yeah, so there's a range of different ones that I would probably go with for something like this. But again, I'd spend a little bit of time online trying to get these things right, which is not necessarily time that we have today. So I'm going to try and freeform it a little bit, get those focus lines in as well, really get that sense of movement. Could also potentially play with a speech bubble. Again, just to give it even more of a kind of a manga-y vibe. Could play with like a sound effect as well. I don't know what sound effect does soap make? That's a good question for the chat. To put in something like back here in terms of like a sound effect, just to add that like manga vibe.
All right, chat. Time to shine. What sound does soap make?
Hopefully no sound, but right. So we got our sketch down, and now I'm going to start adding in a little bit more inking. So I've just grouped all those bits together, and now I'm going to get in there with an actual ink line that's going to look a little bit better. All right, so this is where I'm going to be a little bit more rough around the edges. So normally what I would do, and if you guys were watching the stream last week, what happens is I like to be really clean and smooth with my line work and kind of take my time and try doing a line over and over a bunch of times. I'm not going to play that game today. I'm going to be a little bit more rough and keep it a little bit more kind of drawing-y. So I've still got my smoothing up to like 12%. But again, the name of the game here is just getting a little bit more speed going. If I want to get color in there as well, that's going to be really important. So here we go.
Cool. As you're doing that, we've got the timer going. Got about 12 minutes left until our designated Q&A section. We don't have to take a Q&A break if you want to keep going.
Oh, no, I love it, man. Please. If you guys have questions, let's hear them. I always love kind of talking and drawing is a possibility.
Cool.
So yeah, let's have it.
But I'll let you know when that happens. So if you need to take a break or if we need to, all that sort of stuff. I realized when I asked what does soap sound like, I'm going to have to actually read these out. I don't know how to do yours, Trisha. This is going to be really embarrassing. Soul. It looks like it's like soul-re. Squeak. That's a lot easier to say. Bubbles. Spleesh.
That's good. Spleesh is cool. I like spleesh. Maybe we'll do that as in like
Cleesh or spleesh.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. That'll be it. We'll do spleesh. I like that. Sounds like a good thing.
Did you read the Yoko Tsuno comics by Belgian comic writer Roger Leloup?
I did not.
You did not?
I did not.
That sounds cool.
You link it in chat, and I'll take a look for sure. Was down to check out new ones. I'm talking about like more old school stuff. I'm more kind of talking about things like Professor Slump, or like obviously like Dragon Ball is always a reference, but stuff like High School Kibengumi, Space Invader Lum, all those kind of things that just a little bit more kind of like 90s and 80s, even maybe into 70s with stuff like Osamu Tezuka and Astro Boy. Just, I don't know, the stories I find a little bit more interesting, but also just the drawings are quite cool, and maybe a little bit more thought going into what they're actually kind of doing and how they all actually work. Also maybe a little bit of just nostalgia, because that's what I grew up on, so
Yeah.
that's what I like better. It's definitely possible that exists in my brain.
I know this isn't the sort of same style, but have you ever watched One Punch Man? Have you done that?
Yes. Yeah.
It's just making fun of everything. Had a great time watching that.
Yeah, it's super, like, I think that even like the illustration style of that is kind of cool, like quite different. It's not what you would expect, his face being so like blank and just emotionless. It's quite fun to watch. Interestingly, they've released a bunch of video games around it and realized that was a really bad idea, because like playing a video game of One Punch Man is basically like playing a video game on God mode, where
Right, with all the cheats on.
Yeah, that's the whole point of the manga, right? Like, he's so bored, and that's why his face looks the way it is, because he knows he's just going to win with one hit every single time. So yeah, doing that, translating that into a video game is like, oh yeah, right, okay, that was dumb. Got his scrubs on. All right, let's get into this face. I tend to put things off a little bit. If I'm not super confident with drawing them, I'll wait till the last minute, which is actually a really, really bad thing to do, because sometimes fixing that thing means like fixing a whole bunch of other things, and then you're in this position where like you've done all of that stuff and it's looking good or okay, and you're far less likely to fix it now because you've just gotten so far into it. So yeah, that's like, don't do what I do, kids. Taking a little bit more time with the eyes here, simply because it's required.
I have another maybe comic or anime suggestion of City Hunter by Stefano. I haven't seen that one.
Yeah, loved City Hunter. That was so good. Yeah, that's a good like classic old school one. It's like not super old school, but yeah, definitely City Hunter is awesome. The whole like, it's the goofiness. It's so like Japanese kind of style of like going from like crazy serious and like handsome to just like stupid and goofy in the matter of a heartbeat. It's definitely one of those things that happens a lot. Yeah, City Hunter is always a super fun one to watch as well. Space Cobra is also a really good one for those of you guys. If you're a fan of City Hunter, you'll probably like Space Cobra as well. Similar kind of like character in there.
I've got all this homework now. I'm saving all these, everything you're suggesting. Xavier, is the superhero nurse going to wear Crocs? Oh, I hope not.
Oh, well, I'm probably not going to have her feet in, so that's probably going to be cut off here. But she could be wearing Crocs, yeah. But I know how to draw Crocs, and I don't want to go online and find images of Crocs. See, I'm struggling with the angle of the hair here a little bit. It's not quite, that's a little bit better. It's a rounded square look. Sometimes it's the simple things. if I'm like rotating too often or too much, or zooming in and out a little bit too much, it's starting to be a little bit annoying.
No, it's all good over here. Johanna was saying Crocs are actually the best for doctors and nurses. All the hip docs I know wear them. Do your parents wear them, Joe? That actually does make a lot of sense. That would probably be incredibly practical.
Is it comfortable, or is it like protection as well?
I would have thought you'd have to wear closed shoes.
Crocs are kind of closed.
They don't know what they are.
Are Crocs an Aussie thing? Do we have to talk about Crocs for people joining us from other places?
I think they're global, aren't they? They're called alligators in the States.
Are they?
No. Sorry, it's Friday.
I get it. I get it.
Because of the...
you're a dad.
I'm a dad. I got to throw in a dad joke once a week. What's your favorite country or place to visit for inspo? And I'll back that up by saying, have you been to Japan?
I have twice. And I was planning another trip at the end of this year. And that's looking incredibly unlikely.
But yeah, on the back burner at the moment, isn't it?
Japan for inspo and just for like that kind of stuff. Obviously, Japan is very, very high up on that list. Simply, it's one of those places. Like, I'm not huge on taking photos when we go places, simply because I think it's one of those things that it's just like, I like to just experience it for myself.
Yeah.
And not be just kind of like, I realized after a time that I was taking a photo of it. I was like going to a place, taking a photo of it, and then leaving once I had the photo.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And then you're stuck looking at the photo to remember it, just like everybody else. It's like, wait, hang on, let me do this for myself a little bit, not like just to get a photograph.
Yeah.
But yeah, Japan is one of those places where I will go and just like come back with 3,000 photographs of just nothing.
Yeah, the photographs almost never do it justice, right?
Yeah. It's always better in your brain. So you can see, like, I would normally take a lot more time doing this kind of stuff. But because I'm going for that mango vibe, I will allow myself to this kind of thing.
Yeah, we've also got you on like a literal timer, so changes things up.
How are we going? Have we got questions coming in? Or?
We do, yeah. Well, we've got about 2.5 minutes left on the clock, and then we've got a couple of questions. But I'll start now because you're very talented. You can do more than one thing at one time. I've seen you do it. Favorite websites for drawing and art inspo outside of Instagram? Do you have anywhere you go for inspiration around the art side of Insta?
Probably single website that I would go to the most often is probably ArtStation. Otherwise, it's just trolling through like Pinterest or any of those kind of things. Like a lot of people, I use Pinterest as a kind of obviously an inspiration board. It's my like online board where I go for like references and stuff like that. So if I'm trying to draw hands or anything kind of tricky like that, I have a Pinterest board for all different kinds of things, for like Japanese things, just to get like, it's basically the place where I put all my reference.
Right.
And it's great that it's online because it just means that it's accessible from anywhere.
Yeah, just straight from the browser.
Yeah, so there's not really like a particular website aside from, like I said, ArtStation, where I would really go to quite regularly and find all this kind of stuff. But yeah,
cool. I think Jeff Chen, who was on with us almost a week ago on Saturday, was he's quite big on there. He's quite a community over there as well. Festus has seen many docs wear Crocs, so there you go.
Yeah.
So we learn
Oh,
together.
yeah. I think it's definitely a very doctory kind of thing to wear, I think.
Mm.
Get that stethoscope going. I'm definitely cutting a bunch of corners with all of this, like not necessarily finishing off lines properly or things like a stethoscope looks just like whatever. But again, sometimes it can be good to just do the thing and not worry about how, like, oh, that's not completely accurate, or like even the snake's head's a little bit kind of funky and not quite right. But there's that balance. I think we were talking about this last week where, in between kind of perfectionism and actually like producing work, if you're trying to be too perfectionist about a thing, then it may stop you from actually getting a good amount of work done.
Right. Like actually getting it done.
Yeah. And like anybody who looks at this would see that it's a stethoscope. Like it does probably, if I was doing it properly, I'd probably have to go in online and look at a stethoscope and get that right. But there is a point also to be made for just, if people can see what it is, then that's good enough.
Yeah.
If it doesn't look completely like disproportionate and out of whack, then you're okay. One of the things that I really like to kind of keep in mind when I'm doing this kind of thing is, like, you're always learning when you're drawing. You never stop learning stuff. And if you do, that's probably not a good thing. Like if you're always drawing the same thing because that's what you're comfortable with, that's not necessarily a good thing. It's even if it's not necessarily going to be shown to the rest of the world, I think it's a good idea to just keep looking at things and stay fresh.
Yeah.
And you know what? I've lost my train of thought. I tend to do that a little bit.
Oh, that's cool, because I got some questions for you.
Okay, cool. Let's go.
You're amazing. That's not a question, but it's nice to pass that on because you are very amazing, Jeremy.
Thank you very much.
And the question following from that is, what drawing tablet are you using?
I am using a Wacom Cintiq 13. So 13 inch.
Is that a 13? Yeah, 13 inch. Yep.
Yeah.
Not 2013.
Not 2013. No. Yeah.
Cool.
That's basically it.
You've kind of used everything, every stylus or tablet. I mean, you're not stuck into one. You've used iPad Pro and Surface, I believe,
absolutely.
as well. Yeah.
Yeah. I've used a Surface Studio. I've used an iPad Pro. I'm using a Wacom. Every now and then, I'll even use this thing that you might have heard of called pen and paper. But like, that's for another time.
Is that for sketching? Is that mostly? Otherwise, is
I don't know. I don't know what it's for, but I use it. I'm going to save this real quick as well because important to always
good idea
remember. Where are we? Oh, whatever, I'll just stick it on my desktop for now and call it Nurse Hero. Bang. All right.
Want some questions?
Yeah, let's hear some more questions for sure.
Cool. Stefano is asking, how do you deal with commissions where you're asked to draw an uncommon subject to you? Like, are you always able to come up with something, or sometimes your style just doesn't fit? Great question.
Yeah, that's a great question, actually, because it is the eternal dilemma of, like, when you have a specific style and you get a brief that doesn't necessarily align with your style, how do you reconciliate those two things? And I think that's a really solid question. The short answer is sometimes you can't, and sometimes it's just you get a brief and it's not really your thing. But every now and then you get a brief that, like, sometimes it's just exactly what you do and the person has come to you for the right thing. Other times it's a little bit trickier than that, and you got to kind of try and, I guess, work with the client to see if you can achieve what you're trying to do, and that might require a little bit of like diplomacy on your part to kind of convince the client that they should do a different thing to what they might have originally intended to do.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think actually what it comes down to at the end of the day, it's we were talking about this last week. I think a little bit of, I see it now as if a client comes in and asks for a thing that I don't necessarily want to deliver or feel comfortable delivering, I maybe see it as my responsibility to not take that job on.
Right.
Now, obviously, that is precluded by the idea that I've got enough work that I can afford to not take on works.
I was going to say you have to eat as well when it's your full-time or a big chunk of your income.
If I'm being completely honest, there are definitely those times where a brief will come along that's not super interesting, but that really does pay quite a bit, and that certainly gives me a little bit more food for thought in terms of like, ooh, can I really afford to not take this one on?
Right. Yeah. Do you ever overprice? Do you ever overprice something and say, it's not really my style, I don't really want to do this, so I'll just price it so high to the point that if they say yes, awesome, and I should do it, and if they say no, that's fine because it wasn't really appropriate for me anyway. Do you ever do that?
As much as I probably shouldn't admit to this when potentially some of my clients are listening.
You don't have to. You don't have to. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that definitely does happen for sure.
I do that.
This idea, but it can backfire as well.
Totally.
It can totally backfire because then, like, yes, if the job goes ahead, you're like, oh, sweet, I'm getting quite a good payout from this. But at the same time, it's that thing of like, cool, now you got to put your money where your mouth is.
Yep.
And deliver something amazing on a job that technically you didn't really want to do or feel comfortable doing. And now you got to do the job as it's like, as for what it's worth. So it's like, can be a little bit of a double-edged sword. But yeah, that definitely happens. But even on the same note, like, there's this idea of reassuringly expensive, and that's not necessarily on briefs where it's, something that's you don't want to do. But I have lost jobs before on the basis of not charging enough for it, and then so there's this idea that it's like, we don't want you to do the work because if you're only going to charge us that much, it's probably not going to be great. So yeah, reassuringly expensive is definitely a thing. So think about that when you're kind of quoting or charging for something. I think is important to look at that and see, am I charging enough? Is the client comfortable that they're going to get something good for their money? It's if you're paying $500 for a TV versus $5,000 for a TV, you're feeling like you're going to get more for your money from the $5,000 one, and that's that idea of reassuringly expensive.
It's the first time in a long time I've heard you made an analogy that wasn't about food.
Yeah, I do have that same analogy with steak, so maybe next time.
So it wasn't a mistake. Keith, I think it was a Cintiq. It's a Cintiq that you're using, right?
Yeah, Cintiq 13-inch.
Johanna was asking, have you ever drawn on your phone?
Yeah. I've had a go. Yeah. Let's just leave it at that.
Cool.
Mostly just because it's this thing of like size does matter when it's something like this, and not because it's like I'm a bit of a tech geek and I like to have nice things. It's also like if your drawing surface is too small, you tend to just get a little bit cramped on your wrist, and it's not like really great. It's nice to be able to move around a little bit. Not that 13 inches on my Cintiq allows me to do that heaps, but definitely on a phone is like, whew, yeah, that's next level. We're talking like really, really small. Even for the biggest phones out there, I think it gets a little bit tricky. But yeah, I've got an iPhone, so drawing with my big fat finger on a tiny little screen like that is not super conducive.
Yeah, I think I have fat finger issues with phones as well.
Yeah, but like I don't think my fingers are fat, but definitely when I put them on a phone, it's like I have huge fingers. So yeah, there are phones that comes with styluses. I've never actually tested one of those out. But yeah, be completely fair, I'm not sure if I really I don't think a phone necessarily is the place for drawing. Like I don't know how many people are having that problem of like, I need to be able to draw on my phone. Why can't I draw on my phone?
Right.
It's like, you know what, if you're that keen on drawing, like that's what a sketchbook is for, or even an iPad, like any of those things you could use to do what you need to do. So yeah, that's my own personal thing though. I think everybody, and I think this is really important as well, like what works for someone might not work for someone else. And so where I think like 13-inch is on the verge of being too small for me, someone else might be like, no, it's fine. It's probably a little bit too big actually.
Right.
Yeah, and look at that. I've gone and drawn on the wrong layer for a while.
We distracted you.
No, I'm good at doing that kind of stuff, and it's all right. It's all good.
There's a couple of questions about, because we kind of brought up pricing and stuff, so we've opened that door. So what do you base your prices on? Are you a per hour kind of person, per project, per day? It's a tough one.
Per project for sure. Yeah. So per hour is an interesting one to give to a client as a marker of like, and we're going to move back to food analogies. It's a little bit like chef's hats, right? Like if somebody has 2 chef's hats and someone else has 3 chef's hats, then you'd feel more comfortable paying the 3 chef's hats more money for the meals because it's that perceived value again. It's reassuringly expensive.
And you reassuringly expensive. I like that. And you mean like a rating system like this restaurant has 3 hats, exactly. Not a chef that's walking around with 3 different hats.
Yes, I do. Yeah, that's exactly what I mean.
To be impressive, but distracting.
Yeah, but it has no bearing on their food as well. Though, I feel.
Yeah, that's true.
So yeah, I think that like giving your client an hourly rate can be a good indicator of that. So like if you're in a very high hourly rate, it immediately lets your client know that you are a relatively senior illustrator who hopefully knows what they're doing if they're charging that much, and therefore is more likely to produce good work because you know what you're doing. So yeah, an hourly rate can be good for that, but it's not generally something that I would use as a marker to figure out how much the overall quote is, mostly because an hour doing one thing is not necessarily worth the same as an hour doing another thing. So like, for instance, like, and this is especially true for like mural artists, for instance, if you're a mural artist and you're, I don't know, let's say that you've got a ceiling to paint instead of a wall, like a ceiling is very painful to paint and will take a lot longer and paint's going to drip into your eyes and all that kind of stuff. So potentially you should earn more for doing that than an hour spent like in your bed drawing in your sweatpants. Like that's not necessarily worth the same. Similarly, I think there's this idea that it's like, if I'm doing something relatively simple like this, I could do this for an hour, and it doesn't take a huge amount of skill to do this compared to if I was doing something like crazy realistic and very technical, then obviously that's going to cost a little bit more. So yeah, it really, really varies, and I think it's definitely this idea, this like how long is a piece of string kind of thing.
Yeah.
With these things to gauge, how much do I charge for a thing is a very, very tricky question. And so hourly rate is not necessarily the way to go. But in saying that, then, like, how do you charge for stuff? Project-based is definitely a lot easier to work from.
Yeah, cool.
Then that doesn't answer the question. I'm completely aware of that, but it's mostly because there isn't really
There's
a
not
single
like a yes
answer
or
to
no.
that question.
Yeah.
Every job is different, and even the same job for different clients can be different amounts. That question comes up quite a bit, and it's really like there is no real answer to it. It really just depends on the brief, the client, your level of experience, how fast you've got to do it, what are the usage rights as well of it is another thing to consider. What's the client going to do with it? All those things come into play, and it can be quite tricky to figure out.
It's interesting that you bring up usage rights, because that leads us to a question from Xavier. Do you still have ownership over your illustrations, or do they become the property of your clients, which they can do whatever they want with them?
Well, that depends on what the client orders.
Right.
So if a client orders what we call full usage rights, as in like they purchase the artwork in full, then legally speaking, I no longer own the rights to that artwork. And what that means is, from a strict standpoint, if I want to post that on my website, for instance, or my Instagram, I technically would have to ask them permission to do that. There's yet to be a case where a client refuses for you to post the work that you've done for them on your website, mostly because it's like, it gives them publicity and it lets them kind of share the work a little bit more. So I wouldn't necessarily worry too much about that if that's something that you're afraid of, is like, oh, I can't do that. But what it does absolutely mean is if a client has purchased that artwork and they own the usage rights to it, you can absolutely not ever use that work on another project for another client. Or if somebody's like, hey, I'd like a print of that artwork, can I have that? No, you can't, because I don't own that artwork. That artwork is no longer mine. And what that's akin to is somebody coming to me and asking me, can I, the print of like Picasso that you have on your wall, can I use that in my project as well? No, because I don't own that. It's just a print. So it can be a little bit kind of tricky. Like that. But yeah, some clients will only get partial usage rights, where it's like, we only want it to print on like 500 t-shirts over the span of like 6 months. And that's fine. And then when that usage is finished, you are able to do whatever you want with that artwork, as in you can use it on another job, you can make prints of it, you can do whatever you want, so long as that artwork, the usage rights have come back to you, if that makes sense. So it's, usually my clients just like the peace of mind, and they just go, well, full usage rights. Which means...
Sorry, go on.
Which means more money at the moment. Like, full usage rights is more money. The way I look at it is, imagine you're buying a photograph. You're buying a print of that photograph. It's not going to cost you very much. If you're buying the actual negative of that photograph, it's going to cost you a hell of a lot more. But you are now technically allowed to make reproductions of that photograph and sell those prints. If you've just bought the poster of a famous photograph, you are absolutely not legally allowed to sell that. But if you've bought the negative, it's going to cost you an arm and a leg. But legally speaking, I might be wrong with this in photography, but it's essentially the same thing. The principle holds where it's just, you're only renting that image, in a sense. That's probably a better example, actually. Where, like a house, if you've bought a house, it's going to cost you a lot more. but you can do whatever you want. You can repaint, you can do any of those things. If you're only renting, it's going to cost you less over time, but it means that you can't really do as much. You can't like knock down a wall or whatever you want to do in that flat, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Chat's getting Fight Club vibes from the soap.
Yeah, I just realized that actually, that soap looking pink. I might see if we can do something like this. Maybe the soap is just white, who knows? I like it to have a little bit of color. That's better. Yeah, still a little bit Fight Clubby, but that's cool. It can be a bit Fight Clubby.
Nice. So question about starting, like getting started in illustration. Vince was saying, want to get started in drawing very soon. Love to learn how to draw anime, Japanese art style type of stuff. Where would you suggest to start from, and how did you start?
So again, I don't claim to be very good at this style yet, as you could probably tell from the kind of struggle that I had trying to get the head and the eyes right to begin with.
A little bit too modest, but sure.
Well, you know, just got to be a little bit demanding. There's a particular proportion and look to the manga style that's like seems like it's easy, but it's actually quite tricky. But anyways, I would suggest potentially like just online. Just, you know, you can buy all those like manga, how to draw manga books and all those things. I don't know about that. I think things just like Pinterest, and just go look at manga blogs. There's a lot of places where you can find like, here's how to draw a manga face and do the proportions right and all that. So I'd suggest probably that. But the main thing is just like do it and do it and do it again and again and again and again and again and again. That's really the only way to be able to kind of get any good at kind of drawing, is just to do it a bunch of times, and then you feel kind of a little bit more confident in it. Yeah.
Cool. Good advice. There's no shortcuts with illustration, are there?
I think so. Yeah, I think that's the basic gist of what we're getting at here, is just like you kind of just have to do it, which is one of the awesome things about illustration, and also one of the horrible things about illustration is there's nowhere to hide. But at the same time, that means that like your full level of skill is always on display in every single illustration that you're doing. So it can be a little bit daunting because, like I said, there's nowhere to hide, but it's also really good because it shows plainly to your client how good you are, and why they're paying you what they're paying you. So it's a double-edged sword, but there's definitely advantages to having that kind of like nowhere to hide optic of it. And it's also like, you gotta, you know, the more you do it, the better you'll get at it, and there's no two ways around it. But there is this thing, and I've gotten my train of thought back from like 5 hours ago, what I was going to talk about, is learning stuff. So what you learn when you're drawing versus what you don't. And there's definitely this thing, and I think this is a pretty common idea with, you know, like learning techniques and all that kind of stuff, is 80% of the learning that you do on any particular piece is done within the first 20% of that piece. So for instance, on this piece here, I've probably done all the learning I'm going to do on this piece in terms of like learning how to draw and do manga proportions. That's it. I'm done. The line drawing is done. The proportions are set. From here on in, it's just me like applying color to it and doing different things to it. So I'm not learning as much anymore. Hence, this idea of trying not to be too much of a perfectionist is really important, because you do have this idea that like, if the more time you spend on this, the more diminishing your returns in terms of like learning you will get on it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so, this idea of trying to pump out a huge amount of volume does have merit over, for instance, just trying to be super perfectionist and doing lots of really cool finished pieces can be a little bit kind of tricky because you don't learn as much. So definitely when you're in the learning phase of like trying to figure out all these things, I would say perfectionism is probably going to be your worst enemy because it's going to stop you from learning as much as you might.
The question about gloves has come up a couple of times. Should the nurse have gloves on?
Yes, absolutely. And I just realized that. She should definitely have PPE going than what I've given her. So what I can do is I can actually take that. This is a bit of a time-saving hack. I'm just going to select the part of the skin that I did the hands on and chuck that on a new layer, and then just play with my hue sat to give her gloves. And then that's going to be a little bit better. Gloves. Green, like medical, clinical green.
Sounds right.
Looks right. But then the staff is too similar a color. Maybe that needs to be a different thing. That's better. Yeah, and then I probably need to give a bit of an outline of those gloves. There we go. Oops. Yeah.
Forgot to do our timer. Just threw the timer back in there. There you are. 27 minutes.
Keep the questions coming if you got them.
Yeah, I think the questions are still coming. I just got distracted trying to fix the timer up. So, Jeremy, what about your school journey? Did you go to uni? Was it worth it?
Did I go to uni? Was it worth it?
That's a blunt question. I love that. Did you go to uni? Was it worth it?
Well, I think it's a fair question.
Yeah.
Especially these days. It's like, and I probably can say this because I'm a teacher, and so kind of like questioning the value of a teacher in terms of like if you're trying to be like a mechanic or a carpenter or something like that, not to like diminish the skill that those particular professions have, but there's usually one of those professions where there's one way to do the thing and it's the right way, and every other way is the wrong way.
Right.
There's a formula to do it. Like if you're cooking or like if you're baking specifically and you're trying like and you add like rice flour instead of wheat flour to your donuts, it's like, oh, that's where you went wrong. That's what you did wrong. Whereas with anything creative, music, writing, painting, drawing, you name it, it's just like, see how you go. There's more than one way to do the same thing. And that can be incredibly frustrating, but it can also be quite rewarding. But what it means for a teacher is, I often get some of my students go like, well, how come I got this mark and someone else got that mark? Like, how do you explain that? And sometimes it can be a little bit tricky to explain what's wrong with this one or what is lacking from this one when it's not as clear cut as like, well, you tried to hammer in an eraser instead of trying to hammer in a nail. So that's where you went wrong. That's what you didn't do. And so it's a little bit trickier than that. So there is definitely this merit to the thought that maybe trying to teach art can be a little bit irrelevant in the sense of I guess basically what I'm saying is art is learned. It's not necessarily taught, if that kind of difference makes sense. Like, you can learn how to do art, but I can't teach you how to make a good drawing. I can definitely teach you tips. So again, that's why there is value, and that's why we have art schools, because there are people who have done it before you who maybe can share their experience, and then you can learn from their mistakes, and not repeat those mistakes. So there is absolutely value in that. But the thing that I sometimes kind of compare it to is, like, if you learn how to swim from reading a book, then you're still going to be really struggling the first time you see water and you dive into it. You know what I mean? Like, reading a book about how to swim does not teach you how to swim. You actually have to do the thing. And I think that's one of the things that's inherently missing from a lot of art schools, is, as much as we try and give students live briefs with real clients and all that kind of stuff, it's never going to really feel like the real thing, because it's not the real thing. Only the real thing is the real thing.
Right.
How many times can I say real thing? It kind of doesn't prepare you. And a lot of students, and myself included, when I was in college, I kind of had this thing where it's like, and I did 6 years of college, so I thought I was like more than ready for the industry, and I wasn't, because I wasn't in the industry.
Right.
I was only reading about swimming in the book. I wasn't actually in the pool. So the first time you hear students kind of go into an agency, like, oh my God, all these things that I didn't really understand or know about, it's like, well, yeah, that makes sense. So again, I'm not saying, like, destroy all the art schools and it's all useless and don't go to art school, because I definitely learnt a hell of a lot from art school. But I think this idea that a school can make you industry ready is flawed inherently, because you're not the industry. Only the industry can make you industry ready. Only the actual thing gives you practice in the actual thing.
Yeah, totally. Some great advice.
Yeah, it's always a little bit tricky with that, but I think it's just important to remember. The main thing that I think I would say I got out of school is it's an awesome place to practice. So it's a place where you've got the computers and you've got the gear and there's other people doing the same thing. Like, treat it as a studio, I guess. It's a place that you don't have to pay rent on. It's a studio. They've got all this tech. It's very conducive to you doing art. And it's a really great frame for people to learn and kind of find their bearings with what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
And to be fair, because I did 6 years or 5 years, of college. The day we graduated, I felt a little bit at a loss. I was kind of like institutionalized. It's like coming out of jail for the first time in like 70 years. It's like, what do I do? Where do I go? Well, like, I need somebody to tell me what to do and give me a brief. So there is that as well, but it's an awesome spot to like practice and do all those things.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of schools try and push this idea that we do prepare people for the industry. And yes, while you do give them the maybe technical skills in terms of like, here's how to use Photoshop or InDesign or Illustrator or whatever, saying that they have the experience and that they know how to lead a brief for the first time when a client comes in and says, oh, this is terrible, what else have you got? Like, only that thing prepares you for that thing.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Long-winded answer, but yeah.
No, those are the answers we like. There's a lot of nuance in there, and as you said, it's like, how long's a piece of string with a lot of that stuff as well. Like, there's a lot of ifs and ands around a lot of these answers, because there is no blanket. It reminds me a bit of, but yeah, sorry, just to qualify that. But also talking about it is really incredibly valuable, because it's all the stuff around it, and unpacking it, and sort of hearing you talk about your perspective on the industry from being a practitioner, being a student, and also being a teacher is super valuable, I think, for anyone that's interested in it and getting your perspectives.
Yeah. Well, again, it's just, I think it's just a matter of like knowing what you're getting into.
So I'll let you know we've got about 20 minutes left, just for your timing, and have another sort of follow-up question on sort of paying and invoicing and things like that. Stefano was asking, how did you land your first paid commission, and how do you approach new clients?
Yeah, that's another question that comes up quite a bit, actually, of like, how do you get new jobs and such? And again, I think it's one of those, like, there's no real, like, straightforward answer to that. I think that job tends to come to you when your first job is not necessarily something that you are able to just go out or have the confidence or even the skill potentially to just go and get. I think it usually just something that finds you, whether it finds you for the right reasons and for the right kind of work, as in like if the client is asking you to do something that you can potentially do, is down to your portfolio and how you kind of present yourself to those potential clients. So I think that's probably the big thing with that answer is that job will probably find you, and it needs to find you for the right reasons, which means potentially doing, work, like find projects or clients that you think you might like to work for or with, and then try and sort of approach them. That's one of the benefits of Instagram, I think, is being able to just tag people in things and having the right people see the work that you're trying to do. I think that can be incredibly valuable. But in saying that as well, like, when you're starting out, that potentially means doing a lot of free work, which is not necessarily the best thing to do. But I think definitely trying to find work can be very, very hard. But looking at it in a sense of like, do the work you want to be asked to do in your portfolio. So in your portfolio, put things like if your dream client is, some like skateboard company or like working with like video games or something, then when the next like video game comes out, do an illustration of that, right? Like I like to do a lot of like video game clients. And so for instance, like something that I've potentially going to be trying to do is PlayStation have released photos of the new controller, and a lot of people have been doing mock-ups of like, here's how this game would look on that controller, and doing like custom designs of that. Like that's typically something that you could do, right? And then like try and tag PlayStation in that, or whoever the client is that you want to do. And obviously there's no guarantee that they will see it, and even if they do, that they will like it and get back in touch, but there's no harm in trying. And worst case scenario, you get a cool piece to add to your portfolio. And
you kind of keep moving forward in that way, and it's a time thing, right?
So again, like just there's definitely a bit of luck involved. But the end story is when luck does get involved and your portfolio isn't ready, or you know what I mean? Like if you're like, that's really cool. Like you meet somebody at a conference of design or something, and they're like, let's see your work. Show me your stuff. It's like, I don't have a website yet, or I've only got like a strange Tumblr page, or like, have you got a business card? No, sorry, I don't. Not saying that business cards are the be all end all, but definitely it looks bad if when that person, like opportunity potentially shows up and you're not ready for it. Like, that's definitely less than ideal.
Yeah, you got to be ready for the good news. Hey, we want to work with you. It's like, I'm not really ready, right? Not really ready yet. Exactly. I'm not actually sure if I can do that.
send us a sample of your work. It's like, I haven't done anything yet. Okay, well then that's what I mean. Like do those things and then get in touch with those people. And so that when those people get in touch with you and say, send us samples of your work, again, to like client A, if you've done a whole bunch of like mock-ups around client A and they go, well, send us examples of your work, you're going to blow them away potentially, because it's like, oh wow, you've done all this stuff around our brand and you really understand what our brand is, and yeah, let's definitely do some work together.
That little soap sud down the bottom looks like a little sad frog. And I like
this one, yeah,
I like him a lot.
Like fried eggs as well.
Oh yeah,
there's a bit of
can't unsee.
I could do the sad dog. Yeah, definitely can't unsee now. Now I'm seeing a frog, and I kind of want to draw a frog in there somewhere randomly, but I won't. Yeah. That's not bad. By the way, this one up here, I did stick with the spleesh one, but I've put it in katakana to kind of give it that more legit manga look.
Yeah.
These always just makes vibe come off a little bit better.
I was going to say before, those unanswerable questions that you sort of see up, I think it's important to be wary, I think, of people that do give you one word or yes or no or a number kind of answers. Yeah. Because you see it every now and then, you sort of think, well, yeah, but not always. And one of the questions that comes up, which I'd love your perspective on, Jeremy, is like portfolio. Like how many pieces are in a portfolio? You might have had that question come up once or twice, and somewhat irrelevant for a website, but I guess from a student, someone starting out, like if I asked you that question, how many pieces do I need in my portfolio to approach a client, what would you say?
Yeah, so again, that's you're absolutely right. It's definitely one of those things where it's like it's just not that black and white, and it can be super frustrating because like a lot of my students will ask me those questions hoping for a yes or no answer. It's kind of like like asking a politician a question that seemingly is very straightforward, and they just give you kind of like a non-answer. It's like, just answer the question. It's a simple question. It's like, yeah, but it's not really that simple. And so pieces in a portfolio, I think as you said, and that's absolutely true, like be very aware of people who go like, oh, it's like 12 pieces at least. Like based on what? Like why 12? Like how do you gauge that? And I think what happens is, like if we switch back to my website, for instance, what I tend to try and do a lot is put a bunch of different things. So think about it like projects. So the name of the game with a portfolio is quality over quantity is absolutely a thing. So this is a bit extreme, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend having only one piece in your portfolio. But if that piece looks more like a project than a single piece, then you at least you've got the right idea, right? It's still just one piece. It doesn't show a huge kind of range, which is not ideal. And again, not saying that necessarily range is the be-all, end-all of a portfolio. But where, like, for instance, I see some of my students and they show up with a portfolio and it's just like an illustration like this on one page. That's all fine and good, but you could take this and turn it into like a bunch of pages and it becomes a project, right? Or like show me this on how you would do this on like stickers or t-shirts or whatever. Like another good example, I use this example like basically every time I come on the stream, but something like this, for instance, like that's a simple illustration. And again, that could just be one page in my portfolio, but because I've got that's 1, 2, 3, maybe 3 pages, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 pages in my portfolio, right? And so that becomes a project. And if you look at any agency's website, you'll notice the same thing. They're not just posting like a can of drink or something like that randomly. They're posting an entire project of like, here's the brief, here's a little bit of history about who the client was, here's some context behind it. And that, I think, is the crucial thing, is context. It's not just like, oh, this is a drawing that I made because I felt like it, which will be potentially appreciated, but it won't be appreciated for what you think it will be, as in everybody likes good art, but if we want good art, we'll go to a gallery. So when you go to a gallery, you're not necessarily going there to think about like, who can I hire? I need to find an artist so that I can hire for this packaging project. Let me go to like the Art Gallery of New South Wales and find somebody. That's not how it works. And so trying to put like a bit more context in your thing is really crucial, and finding that right client is really good. So if you're going to do like, let me see if I can find something, for example.
Just letting you and chat know we've got about 8.5 minutes left on the timer, and that's when we'll start kind of having a look at the final image, saying our goodbyes and everything. So if there are any final questions, Xavier, I've seen yours. I'll ask yours in a moment.
I don't know. I can't come up with an example right now, but yeah, the idea is, even if you do just a random sketch, try and think of a brief that it could apply to, right? Try and think of a client a brand or a company who might actually use something like that, and then try and hit them up with it. So I know, here we go. This one, for instance, is something that I did for like an upcoming video game, Cyberpunk 2077. I just did this and I tagged them in it, and I ended up getting in touch through like a bunch of different steps, and a fair bit of effort. It was more than just this illustration, but I ended up getting in touch with the art director on the game. And it went nowhere. She just said like, oh, your work's really awesome, but we don't have anything going at the moment. We'll let you know. So, you know, again, I potentially ended up doing that work for no money, but it's not for nothing.
Yeah.
And I think that's the important thing, is do that piece, put it in your portfolio, and then show that client how they could use it. Show me that on posters, or make stickers, or, you know, whatever works. If it's a swimsuit company, put it on a beach towel. You know what I mean? Like, don't just show the piece on its own. So I think that's where a student who has maybe 3 projects, but those 3 projects make up a whole bunch of pages and there's context and I can see what's going on, is really a lot more interesting than a student who has like 25 individual pieces in there without any context. That's not great.
Yeah, totally. Promise I'd ask this question from Xavier. So do you think your style will be unchanged for the next 10 years, or which direction do you see yourself going?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Style is evolving all the time, and I think so it should be.
Yeah.
The thing is, I think style is confusing, I think, in the sense that a lot of people think that style means you do pencil drawings and that's your style, or you do like manga art and that's your style, or pixel art and that's your style. That's not your style, that's your technique. It's two completely different things. And what I kind of like to think about it is, if you think about Tim Burton, for instance, Tim Burton has a very distinctive visual style. Like, you can tell a Tim Burton movie from a mile away. But actually what makes his style is not the gothic kind of dark themes. What makes his style his is the world that he creates around it, the themes that he works with, and kind of the characters that he builds. And that's why when you look at a movie like Batman or Edward Scissorhands, those things are what a lot of people would sort of traditionally see as Burton. But then you see a movie like Big Fish, which visually doesn't really look like it doesn't have the Gothic cathedrals and the scary people wearing black leather and all that kind of stuff, but it still absolutely feels like Tim Burton because of the world that he builds. I think that's the distinction with style is when I do a manga piece, which is very, very different, like if I'm doing something like this, for instance, that's very kind of techie. From a technique point of view, it's very different to doing something like this, or even something like this, right? They're all very, very different techniques, but what I like to try and do is build a bit of a world. So when I'm doing pixel art, it still kind of fits with the themes that I like to work with.
Yeah.
When I'm doing manga, it's still, again, like this is neon lit. It's got that color. I could, if I wanted to, again, like I feel like this needs to be a little bit more like dignified than that, but I could start adding in, like a little bit more kind of cyberpunky vibes and give her a visor on her and like give her a little kind of like earpiece and all that kind of stuff. So I'd probably, if I was doing this as a like personal thing, if this doesn't need to fit necessarily into a brief like Honor the Heroes for Adobe, then I would probably do that a little bit more.
Yeah.
But again, it's like regardless of the technique or the visual style that I'm employing, it's what the content is of that illustration that makes my style mine, I think. And it's a little bit less immediately recognizable for a client because you've got to dig into it a little bit more, but it's just got a little bit more longevity and it allows me to move around from one thing to the next. To like today I feel like manga, tomorrow I feel like pixel, then I feel like doing a completely cyberpunky kind of thing. But it does evolve, absolutely does evolve. I don't think that trying to be like, I'm going to be this person and I'm going to be this person forever is completely unrealistic, I think.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Great answer. We've probably got time for one more question with a quick answer. So we've got about 2.5 minutes left to answer this question, Jeremy. So literal clock. How do you deal with finding work when you're at the beginning of your career? For example, only having 1 year experience.
Like I said, I think it's just portfolio, like work on your portfolio. We talked about that a bit,
yeah.
Yeah, like find those clients. My biggest piece of advice, I guess, for something like that would be make a list of your dream clients. It doesn't have to be realistic, right? It's like, oh, but that would never go through. It's like, who cares? Just write their name down. It'll just give you an idea of the kind of work and clients and projects that you'd like to work on, and then do those in your portfolio, and then put them out on Instagram, on your website, on a whole bunch of different things, and just see what happens. But it's like the lottery. Like if you don't play, you're guaranteed you will never win. So play as much as you can, as often as you can, to raise your chances. There's no guarantees, but the only guarantee is if you don't, you're guaranteed to never actually get anything. So
right. Got to be in it to win it.
Yep.
Cool. This is looking amazing. Can't believe you've done this from scratch while answering all of our questions as well.
I have an idea in my brain on this. And again, like I'd probably do a variation of this that's more in line with like actual manga colors, as in like the yellow and the black, kind of off-white paper and the black. That's always kind of super fun for me to do to get that manga vibe. But because we had a little bit of time, I decided to put some Jeremy Lord colors in there as well. Yeah,
G Lord. That's awesome. It's been great. And chat, you've been amazing as well. So this is all part of the Honor Heroes campaign. So Jeremy, if you don't mind, I might ask you to bring that up again, just for people that might be catching the end of this stream. This is something that you can participate in. This is open to everyone. #Honor Heroes. And if you want to see some more amazing artists tackling this brief, just put the hashtag in Instagram, Twitter. I've seen quite a few on Twitter as well. You can check out some other examples, see what everybody else has done, and you don't have to be an expert to get involved. We'd love to see it. Tag Jeremy or me. You can see our tags down the bottom. We'd love to see it if you have a go yourself. That would be super cool. So give that a go, no matter what stage you are at. Just bringing us up again, but Jeremy, it's been great hanging out with you.
As always, and hanging out with everybody else as well. I've got lots of really good questions. And it's always super fun to kind of chat about these things while I'm drawing. It just kind of gives me a bit of an absent-minded thing to do. And time kind of flies, actually.
It really does, yeah. Like we went through very, very quickly. So next week, we've got a couple of great people lined up. We've got Bill Hope coming in to kick us off next week.
Yeah. Talking about somebody who has like top-notch drawing skills, like Bill Hope is like, I wish I could draw like Bill Hope. He is incredible.
And he's a very lovely guy as well. He's very impressive to watch as well. So if you enjoyed our day with Jeremy, you'll enjoy time with Bill. We've got Jeff Chen coming in as well, and Bianca Beers as well, doing her Adobe Live working from home version debut. So we've got some more stuff coming as well. So I hope you can hang out with us, same sort of time, 8:30, 9 o'clock Sydney time, Tuesday to Saturday next week. So we're going to have a big week. But thank you, chat. Thank you, everybody. And thank you so much, thanks. Jeremy Lord.
Thank you. Thanks for having me again. And thanks everybody for the questions. And hopefully probably do another one pretty soon. In the meantime, stay safe.
Absolutely. All right. Bye, everyone.